Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university, focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
To say that real estate and real estate development and commercial development are a bright spot in the economy is a gross understatement. I'm Chris William, and welcome again to the most widely watched and longest running source of Carolina business, policy, and public affairs, seen for 30 years across North and South Carolina. And we will continue the dialogue this week with a look at commercial development and construction, as well as real estate. It is broad and wide indeed, and we start now.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, a panel discussion featuring Pat Rodgers of Rodgers Builders, Andy Andrews from Dominion Realty Partners LLC, Dale Stigamier of LCK, and Morris Lyles from the South Carolina Realtors Association.
The velocity of change certainly seems historically unparalleled. Clearly, this level of activity, and not just broad economic activity, but certainly in residential, commercial, development, construction. Pat Rodgers, we'll start with you. How does it end, and is it sustainable?
Well, first of all, I hope it doesn't end, and I don't think it will. I think as a region, the Carolinas, we work well together. I think we're optimistic that the future of the Carolinas and the entire region is strong. You know, for us, 2020 obviously brought challenges to everybody, but it ended up being one of our strongest years and was our largest volume year. And I want to take just a second and kind of a little bit of privilege here to just say thank you to the trade workers and subcontractors and their leadership, essential businesses who continue to work to build the Carolinas through the pandemic. It made a difference. You know, some of our clients are still delaying but not canceling large projects because they're unsure what their future business challenges are going to be. We've got supply chain disruptions, labor material challenges. Those are the things that we've got to work through to make sure it doesn't stop.
Gentlemen, how do you weigh in on this?
I agree with Pat. I think the Carolinas do work very well together. I think that it's been an unprecedented time. She touched on supply chain issues, touched on material cost increases. We're all wrestling through that, but I think ultimately I don't see a lot of overbuilding, and I see that this is going to continue on for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think from my perspective, go ahead, Marcy.
You know, from the residential perspective, we're seeing a number of people wanting to relocate to the Carolinas, you know, during the pandemic and still today. So I think we're going to see that continue.
I think from our perspective, we're in touch with a lot of institutional equity out there that looks at the Sun Belt is unique in itself around the United States. There's no other place or places that are as active as the Mecklenburg County area and the Triangle, and obviously South Carolina also. So the building that we're experiencing is not going on all around the country. So we're pretty fortunate there, and we're taking what's happening here and looking at it. Oh, it's happening all over the country, but that's not the case.
You know, Andy, you touched on something. Pat, I want to leverage off of that and bring it back to you. Andy talked about the financing side and the institutional investors, which, of course, as we all know, finances the lifeblood of the development business. Pat, if interest rates tick up even 1%, is it a game changer?
You know, I don't think it is. I mean, for us, with the construction side, we've learned how to do things a little bit differently. You know, and with the 2020 pandemic still going on, not nearly strong, obviously, but, you know, we had other natural factors that happened. We had things like the ice storm in Texas. We had the cost of materials going up. Those were challenges. But we've figured out how to work around them. We're doing things a lot differently than we used to do. We're doing a lot of prefabrication. So we're doing it more economically, more efficiently, and we're doing it quicker. So I think those things will balance out the other challenges that we'll face, and who knows what those are, but I think we've gotten smarter.
Does anybody have a different point of view on the financing side, that it is historically, secularly, generationally low interest rates, but if that goes up or starts to trend, again, is this a game changer?
From our perspective and the size projects we're doing between 60 million and 130 million, I can agree with you that if we have a sharp uptick in interest rates, it's going to impact the consumer, which we're passing all those increases down to the consumer level. So there's no way to avoid it. We don't need it. It doesn't seem like it's going to occur. Banks are getting more aggressive today than they were 6 months ago. Clearly, it's a much more aggressive environment for us in the development business today. Banks are actively looking for to place some money out there.
Yeah, Morris, I can't help but think about, we've a lot of us has faced either selling a house or buying a house or both, or buying a new house, and certainly, top of mind here. How does the residential buyer, seller, how do they fare if rates go up? Or what's the general consensus besides everyone is chasing asset prices at this point?
Yeah, so, I feel like if the rates do go up, I do feel like we'll see some slowdown in the velocity of the market, and also some slowdown in the price increases. I mean, we've seen year over year price increases in the, some definitely in the double digits, but some up to 20% in the Charleston market. I think Charlotte has had a huge increases, and also the Raleigh market. So, all of those areas, I think you'll see maybe some slowdown in those price increases.
Dale?
Yeah, I think interest rates will absolutely have an impact as they tick up. We do a lot of work, our client base, a lot of owner-occupied space, particularly in the industrial sector, as folks are onshoring product, and certainly watching the interest rate environment. But things that are affecting our world more, material price increases, and really procurement time is where we're facing the most challenges and most concern.
Pat, how do you manage through, especially given the broad enterprise that Rodgers Builders is, how do you manage through the acute rise in raw material, not just wood, not just sheetrock, but steel and employment and workers? I mean, isn't that become and this is my term, man, but doesn't that become really the headwind that gets stronger for you?
Absolutely. I mean, the material shortages that we're confronting right now in metal, and anything that comes out of that's made in the factories that were shut down during the pandemic, and some of the states that were totally shut down, they have not been able to get back up to full capacity. Even though they're open, they just don't have the workforce, the trained workforce, to be able to bring them back to full capacity. So it is a challenge. It's a challenge on almost every project that we have. And we see it beginning to get a little better, but it hasn't turned completely around post-pandemic. It just hasn't.
When do you think it normalizes? When do you think it regresses back to the mean of whatever raw material prices were?
Well, I think, to the interest rate question, if that slows things down, then, it will follow. They'll start to gain some capacity because they won't have the demand. But hopefully we find a balance in between the two of those, and we're able to face the headwinds and find a way around it.
Andy, when you develop a project, just given the conversation we just had about raw material prices and how you factor out or pro forma what your costs are going to be, and then you have to build that into, if they're condos or apartments or mixed use or whatever. You can't, trees don't grow to the sky, and you can't keep going up on the price per foot, can you? I mean, where is that absorbed, and how do you manage through, and how do you just say, we're not going to do it? It just financially doesn't work.
Yeah, at some point in time, you're right, Chris, it is going to be a ceiling here. Fortunately, wood has gone down. It was getting to that point. It was just a profit grab, but it has definitely decreased a lot in the last 60 days, which has helped us be able to go ahead and move forward with some apartment complexes. We've seen a 100% increase in the cost of building an apartment complex in the last 7 years. In the last 7 years, we've seen a 100% increase in steel, and concrete's up 100%, labor's up. So we're having to deal with those issues. But, the larger the project, right now, we're able to hold a little bit of the uncertainty. So we're able to move forward, but we are keeping an eye on it. It is a big issue right now, especially in the office market, because the office market is, under some pressure right now with the pandemic, and people aren't going back to work yet. So the office market's been in a real lull for the last 18 months, whereas apartments, they're hot as firecrackers because people don't want to spend the money on a house with the housing increases. They want to wait a year, so they'll rent a place. And so that in the whole Carolinas, we're at about a 97% occupancy in apartments. And we got people are still moving down here in droves. It's a popular spot.
Dale, do you ever say, and I don't want to put you in a position here, but as a manager of a project, and you're not an equity owner, right? I'm right. Correct about that. So do you ever say to a potential client or a client, I wouldn't do it? The numbers don't work. We can do it, but it's not going to work. Or here's the risk. Or you've got to make sure that this doesn't change. Are you saying in more and more that you don't want or you don't think people should do projects?
No, that's not as much the case. We certainly give our clients an objective view of where the market is. So if they have the ability to wait to let some of this pricing normalize, we certainly will put that option on the table for them. We're not going to, in many cases, advise them not to do a project. We're going to let them make their own decision. But we certainly are going to lay out the obstacles, particularly schedule. Mm-hmm. Schedules has become, to us, probably the biggest hindrance is getting steel on a site, getting concrete on your site. Is PVC available because of what happened in Texas, et cetera, et cetera. So that is where we're spending our time, is really educating them on the procurement plan. What do we need to procure now to make your project feasible when you need to occupy that space to deliver your product to the end user?
And Morris, I don't want to get too far down this road, because that, of course, would put you in a position of being kind of counterproductive to what realtors are meant to do. But are you having more conversations with folks that either want to buy a house or sell a house to say, well, you can, but here's where you need to consider given where the historic level of asset prices are?
Yeah, sure. A lot of times you have somebody that has to bid over the asking price or over appraised value to purchase a home.
I would guess more than once or twice they have to.
Absolutely. And you've got to have that conversation with them of what's your ultimate goal? What are you wanting to do? How long are you going to be in that house? Because obviously, if they've got to turn around and sell it the next year, 2 years later, they could be in a bad position. So you want to make sure they're aware of that. And obviously, I think what they do is compare, maybe renting versus buying, and the interest rates are low. So there are a lot of other factors they're looking at, but they're all important.
And to that point, can I say, Chris, that's probably the best thing we have going right now for apartments, because folks, are having to spend a lot more than maybe they had planned on, because they're having to pay above an asking price. And they're going to say, well, we'd rather rent for a year and see if the market corrects itself. It shows that apartments are pretty popular now, and housing is a little bit more difficult, harder to find one, and you're paying a lot more for it.
Pat, what are you seeing since we're talking about these things that have kind of gone through the roof in development, what are you seeing in trends in construction and building? Where are you seeing that a lot of people are moving their money to that maybe they weren't even 12 months ago?
We're seeing things like you mentioned Valentine early on. Valentine was a solid project, solid community, developed community, and now we're working with Northwood, Valentine Reimagined. Mm-hmm. So it's a community that's reimagining itself, and so they're doing a lot of things new, different, bringing things along in a different way because the market has changed. The people who now live in Valentine were different than the people who moved to Valentine 20, 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a lot of that, which is pretty interesting. I mean, we're seeing the redevelopment of a lot of our cities in the Carolinas. You look at Columbia, certainly Greenville, Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, Greensboro. Everybody is trying to reimagine who they are going forward. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot of what's fueling a lot of the interest in the Carolinas. I mean, I can't think of a better place in the country to do business in the Carolinas right now.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. To take that a little bit further, guys, let me unpack this. As Pat talked about Columbia, Dale, Morris, I think about the Bull Street project. You talk about what Hughes has been doing up in Greenville. Andy, what's going on at RTP. Charleston is maybe the hottest growth area in the country. So are these, back to the point about, as you talked about Ballantyne and Charlotte, Pat, are these grand visionary community projects, are more of those? And Andy, I'll start with you. Are more of those happening? Are there more plans for that? Or are they less, but they're much more specific? How would you describe that?
I think there are more plans, and there are going to be more plans. I think all the economic development groups in the Carolinas are realizing they're getting 10 times the inquiries they had 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. So I think the need to have these grandiose plans on the table right now to show, to develop areas that are less served, to go a little further outside of town, to have more density in the middle of the heart of town. I think those things are going to come to light more so than they ever have in our history. And I'm 62 years old, so we've seen a lot, but I think we're going to see a lot more coming up soon with this influx of companies moving to the Carolinas and individuals moving here without a job. I interviewed 30 kids. I don't mean kids, young people, young professionals that moved down, they're renting an apartment, and not one of them had a job. And they were all moving here because they looked it up, they felt good about it, and now they're going to go find a job. I don't think that happened in any of our time frame when we were growing up. But it is a pretty common practice right now.
Dale, especially during the summer months, when you think about projects and you think about resorts in summer and beaches, Daniel Island in the Low Country, of course, Bluffton down in Hilton Head, along the Gold Coast in North Carolina. But is this a solidly is this a hot spot for growth as well, and not just for the next 6 months? But do you see that fleshing out?
Absolutely. I think that there's going to be a tremendous amount of growth and people seeking out a quality of life. They're moving from areas that may be more dense where they currently are. They come to South Carolina, they come to North Carolina, and they realize the beautiful environment that we live within. And so I don't see that growth slowing down anytime soon. And Andy's exactly right. The economic development folks have been doing an outstanding job recruiting business that either want to relocate or expand, and the Carolinas are square on their map. And so we need to be building communities that attract the labor to allow those businesses to be successful.
Morris, does residential play a big part of that coastal growth?
Definitely it does. I mean, I think more and more people are retiring to the coast and to those areas. They're liking what they see down there. There's a lot more infrastructure with medical care, all of those things along the coast to help with as they sort of age in place. So we're seeing a good number of people move in that direction. Absolutely.
I'm trying to find some spots where you all are worried about something, and it doesn't sound like you are. And I'm not pessimistic, but Pat, are you concerned? Do you watch something that says, if we go too far this way, here's what the knock-on effect is going to be? But do you have a short list of things that you're watching that you're concerned about?
Oh yeah, I mean, at the top of that list is the high demand and a shortage of skilled workers. I mean, we have to, as a two-state region, we've really got to put our support behind our local community colleges and our local workforce development programs. I mean, there are some really good ones out there, and we need to play a part in helping them gain momentum, supporting them. That's really important. I worry about that. Mm-hmm. It's not just enlightened self-interest to have a trained workforce. A trained workforce attracts economic development, and it changes the lives of people and lives of families. And so I worry about that we maybe are not putting a focus, as my friend Jim Rodgers from Duke used to always say, if you have a problem, hang a lantern on it. I think we have to hang a lantern on the high demand and shortage of skilled workers, and what can we do as a region to take care of that. I worry about that. Right. I do want to circle back a little bit to what Andy said about communities begin to spread out and grow into other areas outside the core of the cities. And I think that will help. We don't do any housing. We don't do any residential. But I think that will start to balance out housing prices. And as housing moves out from the center city or out from the hub of the region, that'll bring more commercial out into that area as well. And so we're excited about that, and we have an opportunity to do that.
Gentlemen, go ahead, please, Andy. Were you going to say something?
If I could just comment on what Pat said, I'm going to go out on a limb here, Chris, and tell you it's my belief that the rural areas of both our states have suffered for many years. And I truly think this is going to bring a lot of growth to these smaller towns. Look at Fort Mill. Look at what's going on in some of these communities.
Well, I would argue Fort Mill's not really rural, though.
But it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was. And it's growing. Holly Springs in the Triangle in 1995 was 450 people. Today it's 40,000. That's what, that's on the periphery of the Triangle. And I think those little small towns are going to grow into pretty metropolis areas over the next 10 years. And I think that's going to be a real positive for both our states.
Okay. So Dale and Morris, does all of that growth, as Andy just described it and Pat started it, does all of that depend on salient, good transportation policy, or is this going to organically happen anyway to the growth of these smaller communities?
So I was going to interject with what Andy was saying. One of the biggest issues we're seeing smaller, like Lexington, South Carolina, that's right outside of Columbia. They passed a moratorium on new developments, new housing developments, and they haven't done the infrastructure to be ready for this growth. And we've got to be on them about, preparing for this growth. It's coming, building the schools, building the sewer, building the roads, all of those things. Because when you do that, when you pass a 180-day moratorium, it puts everything at a halt and everybody goes somewhere else. So they've got to be careful of how they approach it.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with Morris 100%. I think infrastructure is the big driver, particularly in our Midlands region here, but I know it's a greater South Carolina, North Carolina task. We have to put the infrastructure in place to allow for the growth to happen. And then to Pat's point, having the right schools to educate our youth as they get into the workforce and have that labor pool available to allow these economic development deals to land here.
So, and I would just add just real quick. I stop and think without calling out any specific areas. Some areas around Charlotte that did exactly what they're saying is happening right now. There were communities and incorporated small towns around Charlotte that stymied growth and said, no more development. We're not spending any money on infrastructure. And then there were the people who said, oh, yeah, we're spending money on infrastructure. We're going to do it. And, Fort Mill is one of those, that did that. And a lot of other communities didn't.
So, Pat, specifically to Charlotte, then, if you're talking about that, there was a bruising, and I would say it went on for years, this bruising battle between North Mecklenburg and Iredell County, just north of Charlotte and the county of Mecklenburg, about the I-77 corridor and how they battle back and forth about those toll lanes. But it turns out, or it's turning out, it seems, like those toll lanes are a boon to the economic development. Are we going to see more of these bruising, kind of bare-knuckle blood sport battle?
I hope not. I hope we've learned that, we can, if we can find some harmony in the differences that we have, and if we can do that, it's better for everybody. It's better for the communities. It's better for the people who need jobs. It's better for the families that need more economic development within their communities. That's what I hope for the Carolinas. And I think we'll do it. I think we'll do it really well.
Andy, let me ask you a one-off. Pat had talked about one of the biggest issues is finding talent, and I know you waded in on that as well. Do you feel like, as Pat, and I'm not speaking for you, putting words in your mouth, but Pat talked about the idea that public policy needs to be more inclusive and progressive about figuring out that spot where we can't get talent. Do you feel that the legislators are doing what they can, or can we be doing more?
I think it's a great question, and we always struggle with being ahead of the curve a little bit. And I think this is the momentum is there for us right now. And I think we really do need to support the community colleges. All the other colleges are growing by leaps and bounds. We have a great college system in the Carolinas and in South Carolina also. But to your point, I think we do need to, nudge them a little bit in the governing body to keep them on their P's and Q's so we can move these rural areas forward. I mean, I am not worried about the metropolitan areas. They're going to grow as they're growing. That's not a problem. Okay, let's put that on the table. It's to really help the areas that have seen zero growth in the last 10 years. And I think in order to the transportation issue, if we don't get that straight, they're going to go to another state. We know that. And that's the bottom line.
Sorry, Andy, to interrupt you. We're running out of time. We literally have about 40 seconds left. Dale, Morris, if you can weigh in on this quickly. So specific to South Carolina, with a new Commerce Secretary, Harry Lightsey, with a new CEO at the South Carolina Chamber, Bob Morgan, who knows a lot of these issues. Is it a new day in South Carolina? In 30 seconds, do you feel like they will attack the talent issue?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think their predecessors did a wonderful job, but I see very, very good things ahead. I think both are very business minded, and I think will do good things for our region and state.
I'm very excited about both of them. And I do think that they'll be able to tackle these things and, get our help, get the realtors help, get, developers help. I mean, we know how these things work.
Pat, Andy, Dale, Morris, thank you all for being such game to get all this information. Happy weekend to you. Thanks for leading the charge. Best of luck to you all.
Thank you.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by High Point University, Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you.